Those of you who know me well know that often I have nights where I can't sleep because of massive pains in my back. This week I had a night where I couldn't sleep because of massive fears in my head. I wonder if I was to ask you to close your eyes and picture the thing that gives you the most fear, what it would be that you would picture. As Matthew sets the scene, we're going to see this in verse 28 in a minute. He pictures a true scene that the eyewitness accounts told of Jesus, and it is a perfect storm of fear. Terrifying. But before we read it, I want you to notice two things. If you remember, 2 weeks ago, Jesus saw the crowds that were coming around him, and he wanted to get away. If you look back to verse 18 of Matthew chapter 8, when he saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. So, why does he want to leave? Seems that it's been presented he wants to get shot at the crowds. Remember that. Other thing, remember that having just come across the lake through the storm, there was at least 13 bodies on the boat. So if you look to verse 23, then he, that's Jesus, got into the boat and his disciples followed him. So Jesus plus 12, there's at least 13 bodies on the boat. So remember those two things. He wants to get away from the crowd, and him and all the disciples are with him. Now come to verse 28, and let's read this together. When he arrived at the other side. Now notice something there. We've just said, Matthew's told us all the disciples were there. All of them were on the boat, all of them were in the storm, all of them were terrified. But when they get to the other side, it doesn't say when they arrived at the other side. What does it say? When he arrived. For this episode, Matthew, who's writing this, wants all eyes on Jesus. He just wants you to see him. Let's keep reading. When he arrived at the other side in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men coming from the tombs met him. They were so violent, no one could pass that way. So remember the other thing. Why does Jesus want to get to the other side of the lake? Because he wants away from the crowds. What's he arrived to? Nice little log cabin, beautiful view, and a hot tub. Demons, tombs, violence. Now, I think those 3 things catch most of the things that we are scared of. Demons, death, violence. We'd love to live in a world where demons are just confined to the fantasy world of horror movies. We'd love to live in a world where we weren't constantly confronted by our own mortality. And we would love to live in a world where we didn't have to fear violence and harm done to us. But the Bible is honest, and our fearful consciences deep down know that we live in a world where there is an unseen enemy and an unseen evil realm. Our conscience tells us that one day soon we will all be put in a box. And we all deep down know that everywhere and in everyone is the potential for violence and harm. And that's why we need the 2 things in verse 28 put together. I think Matthew's doing this very deliberately. He's showing you what he wants you to see this morning. This region is home to a perfect storm of all your fears. But he wants your eyes set on the man who has just stepped off the boat, who is the storm calmer. See what he's doing? In the region where it is the home of the perfect storm of all your fears, he wants you to see all eyes on Jesus, the storm calmer. Put it this way. If you close your eyes and all you see is your fears, Matthew wants you to open your eyes and see Jesus. Now, I use that language of eyes and seeing very deliberately because it's language that Matthew puts to work in this passage. It doesn't come across very well in the NIV translation of the Bibles that we use. It comes across better in the ESV. But actually, in verses 29, 32, and 34, Matthew throws down the phrase, and behold, and behold, and behold. So 3 times in this narrative, Matthew is arresting our attention and says, I want you to behold these 3 things. If you see on your handout, I've put the 3 and behold into the narrative. He wants us to see 3 times 3 things that he desperately wants fearful people to behold. It's as if he's saying, boldness in the region of your fears comes by beholding Jesus. You see that? When he stepped off the boat into the region of demons, death, and violence. Boldness in the face of your fears comes through beholding Jesus set foot on that shore. And all I want to do this morning is allow Matthew to fix our eyes 3 times on the 3 things he wants us to behold. You with me? So let's go to the first one then. Verses 29 to 32. The first, and behold, is the demon's response to Jesus. So let's read on. So inserting it at the start. And behold, they cried out, what do you want with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time? Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, if you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs. Now, Matthew wants you to see how demons react when they see Jesus. And notice, that's all that's happened. Has Jesus said anything yet? No. Has he done anything yet? No. They've simply seen him and they start screaming questions at him. Verse 29, what do you want with us, Son of God? Isn't it fascinating they know who he is? Demons recognize divinity. The disciples are still chewing over that question. See, if you look back to verse 27, the storm's been calmed, they're still in the boat, and they ask what question? Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. They don't actually get it until chapter 14, another episode with Jesus on water. And finally they say, chapter 14, verse 33, truly you are the Son of God. So they get there eventually, but what the disciples take a while to get, the demons get instantly. He's the Son of God. And it terrorizes them. It fills the demons with fear. They scream at him, what do you want with us? What's he done? He's simply treading onto their territory, and it terrorizes them. So here's the first thing I want you to see under this point. What we fear is afraid of Jesus. See, the 2 stories together, the calming of the storm and these 2 demon-possessed men, they come together as a package in Mark, Matthew, and Luke's Gospel. They're always together. And I think here in Matthew, they're put together particularly because they're 2 stories about fear. So, the disciples in the storm are terrified because their faith is too small to see that Jesus' authority can calm the storm. But what do they learn? To be a follower of Jesus means your greatest fears are calmed. The demons actually have a greater understanding of who Jesus is than the disciples. Their fear is from a completely accurate understanding of Jesus' identity, and they teach us something as well. That as an enemy of Jesus, you have every reason to be afraid. See the 2 things together? As a follower of Jesus, your greatest fears are calmed. As an enemy of Jesus, you have every reason to be afraid. And so if you're a Christian here this morning, and maybe your life is full of fear, maybe particularly about the spirit world that rages around us, that would devour to have you, you need to see this morning, what you fear is afraid of Jesus. And if they fear him, and you are his, you don't need to fear them. But if you're not a Christian this morning, you need to see that it is a terrifying thing to be Jesus' enemy. Let's look at their second question. Look at verse 29. The second thing they scream at him. Verse 29. Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time? Here's the other thing Matthew wants us to behold under this first point. What torments us will one day be tortured by Jesus. The demons don't just know Jesus' identity, they know their own destiny. There's a time appointed when their time terrorizing people will come to an end, and their time of deserved torture will begin. See, Jesus' exorcisms give an insight into a future kingdom where there will be no trace of them. Jesus' cross shows the place where he triumphs over them. His resurrection shows the place where he has made a public spectacle of them, and his return will usher in a time where there will be no sight or memory of them. They will be cast into the lake of fire. And every evil will face Jesus' justice. We need to get our view of hell right. Hell is not a place where the devil runs the party and the demons get to play. Hell is a place where every demon and the devil face their just torment by Jesus. Where every wicked, evil, sinful, harmful thing receives its justice. And again, if you're a fearful Christian this morning, where fears looming large, and it's so hard to see past the end of them to any prospect of it getting better, Matthew wants you to see, to behold, what torments us will one day be tortured by Jesus. Evil and its effects are limited. Your time in and with Jesus are unlimited. Endless days in a place where there's no accusations or attacks, no guilt or temptations, no lies or wicked voices, no violent impulses or darkness, no shadow of death, and no oppression. Them all tortured, you completely free. But if you're not a Christian, you need to see that the lie the world tells that you only live once is a lie. These words of the demons teach you that there is a time beyond our time here. And one potential destiny is torture. Look at their third question, verse 30. If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs. Now, isn't it mad to think that Jesus has still said nothing and done nothing, but they're on their third question? But this question, in their kind of mad, terrorized frenzy, reveals something else that they are crystal clear on. They're completely at the mercy of Jesus, and they can do nothing without his permission. When Jesus steps onto the shore, they can't escape the two demon-possessed men and go into the pigs on their own decision. They have to ask permission from Jesus. Here's another thing Matthew wants us to behold. What desires to possess you submits to Jesus. Now, what we're seeing in these two men is a proper, intense demonstration of the possession of the devil over certain souls. However, the Bible is clear in its teaching that the devil's hold on these two men is just an intense version on the hold he has on all people. Listen to what John writes in 1 John 5. The whole world is under the control of the evil one. Listen to what Paul says in Ephesians 2. Before we followed Jesus, we all followed the ways of this world and the ruler of the kingdom of the air. It's not just these two men who are under his control. The world is. I was chatting to a mate of mine in Brisbane this week, just at our fence. And as we were chatting, I said, on Sunday we're going to be chatting about demons in church. What do you make of that? And he thought for a minute and he just went, Lee Griffiths has a lot of them. He's a footballer, a lot of issues. But actually that statement probably has more truth in it than we realise, for more of us than we realise. Again, the Bible is clear, the devil is a murderer. He has been from the beginning. And he prowls like a lion, desperate to devour us. But look at the simplicity of the first few words of verse 32. He said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs. This is the only word Jesus says in this episode. It's actually the only word he says on this side of the lake. Verse 28, he arrives. In verse 32, he says, "Go." And by chapter 9, verse 1, where is he? Back on his own side of the lake. In the region of the Gadarenes, he is a man of very limited words. Go. But that word displays his unlimited power. I don't know if you remember when we looked at the centurion. Remember his servant was suffering terribly. The centurion back in chapter 9 verse 8 came to Jesus and said, "Jesus, just say the word." Interesting. Say the word and my servant will be healed. He said, I'm a man under authority. And when I say to my servant, "Go," he goes. And Jesus marvels at the guy's faith. And do you know what he said to the guy? Go. One little word. Unlimited power. This was the Son of God simply saying go and the demons go. It's not a duel between Jesus and the demons. It's a demolition. This is the first big thing Matthew wants you to see. Even from the lips of demons, he is helping us behold who Jesus is. Question 1, he's the Son of God. Question 2, he's the judge of all the earth. Question 3, because he has authority over all things. So when you close your eyes and all you can see is fear, what does Matthew want you to behold? Open your eyes and see Jesus. The Jesus who is willing to enter the darkest regions to display his authority over the darkest things. Demons, death, and violence. He does it here in the region of the Gadarenes. He'll do it later on in Matthew's Gospel in a place called Golgotha, the place of the skull. And the screams from the boat and the disciples and the screams for the demons teach us that through faith in him, if you submit to his authority, place your life under his rule, he calms your greatest fears. But if you rebel against his authority, you live by your own, you follow the authority of the kingdom of the air, you ought to be terrified. That takes us on to the second thing Matthew wants us to see. Look at verse 32b. So here's the second. And behold, we've seen the demons' response to Jesus. Now the pigs' response to the demons. So we'll read from verse 32 again. He said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs. And behold, that's where the word comes. Behold, the whole herd rushed down into the steep bank, into the lake, and died into the water. Now, I don't have a Scooby-Doo why the demons wanted to go into the pigs. No idea. We're not told the reason. We just become witnesses of the result. Dead in the water. Now again, put these two stories that are side by side next to each other. We shouldn't think when the pigs are dead in the water, we should think of the disciples who fear they're about to be dead in the water. They cry out, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." The pigs dead in the water, the disciples almost. What's the difference between the two destinies? Jesus is with the disciples. Now, does that mean that the storm wasn't just a natural disaster, but a supernatural attack? Did the devil want Jesus and the disciples dead in the water? Maybe. Maybe that's why Jesus used the language of rebuking the storm. But what we need to see here is that Matthew wants us to behold, this is on the sheets, behind the devil's many masks lies a murderer. He had the men living in tombs. He has the pigs dead in the water. And he can wear many masks, but the motive behind every mask is murder. There are many masks. The intellectual atheist who says there's no God. Maybe the well-intentioned medium who wants to help people speak to their dead loved ones. Maybe the seemingly innocent invitation to muck about with a Ouija board. Maybe the beautiful temptress who offers satisfaction with no strings. Maybe the dealer who promises a high, who's concealing a den full of the walking dead. Maybe a fantasy game world that normalizes violence and murder for little kids. Maybe the wine sparkling in the glass that conceals a world of consequences. Maybe adverts preaching to us to invest our everything only in this world. Maybe the person who says verbally that they love you but are controlling and harming you. Many masks. And the devil would have us spiritually dead in the water by any means possible and any mask in his armory. The destiny of the pigs shows his desire for us. Maybe you're there going, I feel like I'm already dead. I feel like I'm already living in the tombs. I feel like I'm the guy who my chains are too heavy. No one wants to pass my way. Jesus wants you to behold this morning that although the evil one is a murderer, one little word from Jesus reveals him to be the resurrector, the redeemer. If he can redeem the life of these two men from tombs, he can redeem your life from anything that has oppressed and controlled you. From whatever is gripping your heart and making you choose sin rather than choose Jesus. One little word is big enough. Satan tried to murder Jesus. But actually the act of him trying to murder Jesus was the act of Jesus that dealt a death blow to the evil one. On the cross, Jesus crushed Satan's head. And as he crushes his head, the mask comes off. He's revealed as a murderer. But the consequences of his lies have started to be unraveled and undone. I love the way John nails it. This is 1 John 3 verse 8. He simply says, the reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the devil's work. Oh, happy day. Last quick thing. Verses 33 to 34. A final and behold. We've seen the demons' response to Jesus. We've seen the pigs' response to Jesus. Now we see the town's response to Jesus. Let's read from verse 33. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into the town and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men, as if that's a footnote. Then, and the words here are, and behold, the whole town went out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, now how would you expect that to end? And when they saw him, they begged him to stay. Jesus, more of this, please. Let's transform the tombs into a beach again. Let's get the lake back. What do they say? End of verse 34. They pleaded with him to leave their region. There's a dead Christian guy called Charles Spurgeon. Listen to how he describes this scene. Here was the whole city at a prayer meeting, praying against their own blessing. When Luke tells the story in Luke chapter 8, he fills in the reason why. He says this, Luke 8, they asked Jesus to leave them because, and think about what this reminds you of in the rest of the passage already, because they were overcome with fear. So who do the townsfolk remind you of in this episode? Who are they like? The demons. So verse 31, the demons beg Jesus out of fear. What do you want with us? And in verse 34, the town begged Jesus out of fear. Leave us. Both overcome with fear in a way that wants to drive Jesus away. They fear him rather than put their faith in him. We've already seen the devil's got many masks. And I reckon if I asked you right at the start of this sermon to take your finger and point to one of the verses in this episode where you see where the Satan has his biggest, strongest grip on people's life, what verse would you have put your finger on? Probably verse 28. 2 men in a tomb so violent no one could pass that way. But although it's not as obvious to the eye, the devil's influence is just as controlling over the people living in this town. These 2 men were social outcasts. But here, a fear of Jesus that leads to a rejection of him has become socially acceptable. Here's what Matthew wants us to behold. Where Satan's control is more subtle and socially accepted, the danger is more serious. The 2 men knew they were in need of Jesus. The town didn't. Which is a more dangerous place to be? See, Satan's grip on people's lives is both in those living degraded in poverty in tombs and those deceived by affluence in towns. And here's these people who had Jesus right in front of their eyes. They drive him away, and one day they would close their eyes in death. But their eyes would open in eternity. And they would see the Son of God, who is the judge of all and has authority over all people. And they in that moment would realize that because of their fear of him and driving him away from their town, they are as damned as the devil who deceived them. And so I plead with you that even if your whole family, or even if your whole workplace, or even if your whole community sees Satan as a fantasy evil and Jesus as an irrelevant nuisance, I plead with you. See him for the murderer he is. See behind his many masks. And see your urgent need for the mercy of Jesus to redeem you from what would enslave you all the way to hell. You should fear Jesus, but not in a way that drives him from you, but in a way that draws you to him. As the one who is willing to enter into the darkest places, to display his power over the darkest things, to bring you into the kingdom of light. He has come to destroy the devil's work.